There were exactly 19 seconds between her punchline and the thunder of applause. I counted them. I don't know why. Maybe because I was standing behind a velvet curtain with a champagne glass still trembling in my hand, and that's all I could do, count seconds while listening to the woman I used to call my wife tell an entire room that I was her greatest regret. I mean, come on, she said, giggling into the microphone. We all did stupid things in our 20s. Mine just stuck around for longer than expected. Laughter. Louder than the jazz band. Sharper than the sound of glass clinking. It echoed through the ballroom while she accepted her award, some gleaming glass triangle engraved with her name and the words visionary leader. I didn't clap. I didn't move. I wasn't supposed to hear it. I was supposed to be sitting at table 11, smiling politely with the rest of the plus ones, sipping bad wine and nodding like everything was fine. But the lights backstage were broken, and some intern had led me through the side curtain to surprise her with flowers after her speech. Instead, I stood there like a forgotten ghost. Then she said it. I married Ellis because I thought stability meant safety. But you know what happens when you lock yourself in a padded room for too long? You forget what adrenaline feels like. They laughed harder that time. Even the guy adjusting her mic chuckled. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look sorry. I slowly lowered the flowers. The card inside read, "You make everything worth it." I wrote that this morning. Somewhere, someone cued the music. She walked off stage in heels she'd told me were a gift from the office. I followed at a distance, unnoticed, carrying evidence of a love that no longer existed. And that's when I saw him. He was leaning against a catering cart like he belonged there, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But her eyes flicked toward him with the kind of warmth I hadn't seen in years, not even when I built her a custom bookshelf or made her lemon pancakes on Sundays. An hour later, she'd disappear from that ballroom. And this time, she wouldn't be coming home. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. After she walked off stage, laughing with her coworkers, I watched from a hallway near the service elevator. She disappeared into a restricted area marked staff only, but no one stopped her. She knew where she was going. And worse, she knew who she was going to. At first, I told myself she was just taking a break. Maybe overwhelmed. Maybe trying to avoid all the handshakes and camera flashes. But something about the way her voice dropped when she whispered to that guy near the catering cart, the one with the easy smirk and the slightly undone collar, something about how comfortable she looked, it shattered the last thread of denial I had left. So I waited. I stood outside that door for almost 20 minutes. No one came out. I wanted to knock. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the stupid bouquet in half and leave it on the floor like a warning. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I walked back into the ballroom and sat at table 11 like I was supposed to. Like I was still part of her life. The dessert had melted and the wine was warm. Everyone around me smiled and chatted and took selfies with their partners. I just sat there. Alone. Looking at an empty chair with a name tag that said Mrs. Calla Hartley, honoree. It stayed empty for the rest of the evening. Her coworkers didn't seem worried. One of them even came over to say she'd slipped out early, probably tired after such a big moment. I nodded and lied through my teeth. Yeah, she texted me. Said she'd meet me outside. I left 10 minutes later. Alone. Again. At home, her shoes were still by the door. The black stilettos she only wore for company events. Her makeup bag was open in the bathroom and the robe I bought her last Christmas hung untouched behind the door. I walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table where we used to share midnight cereal after long days. I waited. And waited. At 2:17 a.m. I finally called her. No answer. I called again at 3:06. Still nothing. At 4:41, I received a message, not even a text. Just a voice note, 7 seconds long. I'm safe. Don't wait up. I'll come by in the morning. That's all. 7 seconds. After 10 years of being her shadow, her backup plan, her pillow to scream into when things went wrong, I got a 7-second whisper from somewhere unknown. I sat there until the sun pushed its way through the kitchen blinds. The light didn't make anything better. It just made everything harder to ignore. I finally opened my laptop, logged into our shared Google Drive. I don't even know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe? Closure? Something stupid like a love letter or a receipt. Instead, I found a folder titled Personal. Last modified 2 days ago. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Not of me. Not of us. Of her and him. That same man from the ceremony. His arms around her waist. Her face tilted toward his like a flower reaching for light. One picture was taken in a hotel room I didn't recognize. Another in what looked like an airport lounge. And another, the worst one, was from our backyard. They were in our backyard, standing by the swing I built for her niece's birthday. She was barefoot. He was holding her hand. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, staring at the screen, wondering how many versions of me she had erased behind my back. The funny thing is, betrayal isn't loud. It doesn't show up screaming at your front door. It slips in quietly, wearing the cologne you bought her and smiling with the same lips that once told you forever. And yet, the worst part hadn't even happened yet. Because when she did show up later that morning, hours after I found everything, she didn't knock. She didn't even bring her keys. She just texted, "Can we talk?" And when I opened the door, she was already holding an envelope. What was inside broke me in a way her affair never could. When I opened the door, she didn't say my name. Didn't hug me. Didn't look sorry. She just stood there, makeup from the night before smudged under her eyes, hair tied back like she hadn't slept, or worse, had slept somewhere else. She held the envelope like it was something sacred, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head more than once. I stepped aside. She walked in like a stranger, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors we installed together 3 summers ago, back when we still laughed while doing things as simple as measuring planks. She didn't even look at the kitchen table where I had been sitting all night. Instead, she went straight to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, barely sinking into the cushions like she didn't want to leave a trace. I sat across from her. No words. She placed the envelope on the coffee table between us, gently, like it might explode if dropped. Then she said the first full sentence since the ceremony. "I didn't expect you to find out like that." I didn't answer. My eyes were on the envelope. She pushed it slightly toward me. "It's nothing dramatic," she added. "Just paperwork. A start. A plan." I opened it with fingers that felt like rubber. Inside was a single-page document, neat, typed, emotionless. She'd drawn up a post-marriage separation plan. Not a divorce, not yet. Just a proposal. Like I was a vendor in her supply chain. She'd even titled it Transition Timeline. The language was all so cold, so strategic. Q2, inform spouse, initiate transition. Q3, move into temporary residence. Q4, begin individual financial restructuring. It read like a corporate memo. No mention of love. No acknowledgement of betrayal. Just a smooth, sterile process, as if breaking a home was no different than downsizing an office. "I didn't want it to be ugly," she said, crossing her arms. "I didn't cheat to hurt you. It just happened. Evan and I, we clicked. And I think it's fair to say you and I have been done for a while." I still said nothing. My brain was flipping through 100 memories at once: lazy Sunday mornings, dumb inside jokes, the time we both cried laughing at a squirrel trying to carry a whole bagel up a fence. Done for a while? She pulled something else from her purse, a house key. My key. She placed it next to the envelope like she was returning a borrowed charger. "I'll come back for the rest of my stuff next weekend," she added. "Unless you'd rather box it up." Then she stood. Just like that. No apology. No emotion. Just efficient detachment. She reached the door, hesitated, and without turning said, "I did love you once. I want you to know that." And then she left. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't some spontaneous flame that burned out. This had been drafted, refined, approved like any project she ever ran at work. She planned my replacement while I was making her tea. She typed timelines while I rubbed her feet. She staged her exit like a pitch meeting. And I, stupid, soft-spoken Ellis, had no idea. I sat there in the silence of my own living room, still holding the envelope, and suddenly remembered something odd. My name wasn't even in the document. Not once. Just spouse. I wasn't even a name anymore. And that was when I made the first real decision I'd made in years. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to wait for next weekend. She had her plan. But I had mine. And mine was going to begin before sunset. I didn't move for a while after she left. The sound of the door closing was sharp, final, like a judge's gavel slamming down. The only thing louder was the silence. A kind of silence that feels like someone screaming just outside your hearing range. But then, without warning, I stood up. Not in a dramatic, hero arc kind of way, more like a slow, robotic realization that I didn't want to be surrounded by her shadows anymore. I didn't want to spend the next week walking past her hairbrush, or the bottle of wine she never finished, or the coffee mug that still had her lipstick on the rim. She thought she'd given herself time, a window. A gap between the reveal and the fallout. Like I'd just stay frozen, hurt, predictable. She wanted to control the story. That's what she always did best, control. But I wasn't interested in playing that part anymore. By noon, I had packed every single item she owned into cardboard boxes. I didn't sort anything. I didn't fold her clothes. I didn't care. The photos of us? Gone. The little notes she used to leave on the fridge when we first moved in? Trash. Even her toothbrush straight into a Ziploc with the same detachment she used on me. I labeled the boxes with a black Sharpie she'd once used to write "Dream Big" on a vision board. Now it just read, "Kala's future." Then I called a courier service and paid for same-day delivery. Destination, her office. I included the key she left behind and the transition document she was so proud of. I didn't add a note. She was the one who loved statements. I just wanted her to feel what it was like to be taken out of the equation without warning. I knew she'd be furious. I knew she'd see it as emotional. Maybe even vindictive. But honestly, it wasn't revenge. It was survival. A way to claim space in a house I'd been pushed out of long before she ever met Evan from finance. But here's the part one didn't expect. When I opened our shared closet, the one she used 90% of and I had a lonely 2 hangers in, I found something I wasn't prepared for. A second phone. It was buried under a pile of scarves in a zippered travel pouch. At first, I thought it might be old. But when I turned it on, the screen lit up immediately. No password. Just open. Like she never thought I'd find it. The wallpaper was a photo of her and him, Evan, in Rome. Rome. We'd never even been to Europe together. She used to say international travel was too expensive while we were still building. There were messages. Dozens. A whole digital life. Conversations about her next chapter, jokes about how I still wore flannel to dinner, and even one where she wrote, "He's not angry. He's just there." Like wallpaper. I feel bad sometimes, but not enough to stop. My hands trembled. Not with rage. With the kind of heartbreak that feels clinical. Like you're watching someone dissect the last 10 years of your life with a smile. I should have stopped reading. But I didn't. Because the last message on the thread wasn't about me. It was about her boss. "He thinks I'm with Evan," she wrote. "Let him. Truth is, I already signed the lease. I'll be with Dane starting June. I just need Evan to think I'm serious for a few more weeks." That's when the air left my lungs. Evan wasn't even the real guy. He was a decoy. A cushion. She was playing chess while I was still trying to figure out why the board looked different. I sat on the bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen, realizing for the first time that I had no idea who Kala really was. She wasn't just leaving me. She wasn't just lying. She was operating. Calculating. Masking one betrayal with another. And yet, here's the worst part. A sick, fragile part of me still wanted her to turn around and say she'd made a mistake. Because that's what it's like to love someone who sees you as a placeholder. You keep waiting for the real story to come back. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I had a choice to make. I could bury the phone. Pretend I never saw it. Or I could use it not for revenge, but for the truth. So I made a call. Not to her. Not to Evan. I called Dane. And what he told me next, it flipped everything upside down. Because as it turns out, I wasn't the only man she lied to. I didn't even know what I was going to say when he picked up. My thumb hovered over the call button for a good 10 minutes. Dane, the name from her message, was listed under DC Corporate in the contact list. I assumed he was someone high up in her company, maybe a silent investor, maybe someone she met during a leadership retreat. But his name came up too casually in the messages to be just a coworker. I didn't have a script. No plan. But I pressed the button anyway. Maybe I needed chaos to finally feel something sharp again. He answered on the second ring, clipped and cold, Dane Carlisle speaking. I introduced myself. Slowly. Just my first name. There was a long pause on the other end, not surprised, not curious. Just, still. Then he said, "I was wondering how long it would take before someone else called me about her." That sentence alone should have warned me. We met an hour later, his suggestion. A bland coffee shop near the harbor, one of those places where everyone pretends they're working on a novel but just scroll through their phones. Dane wasn't what I expected. No suit. No Rolex. Just a quiet, wiry man in a faded jacket, eyes like broken glass and hands that fidgeted with the edge of his cup like he was grinding through every second. He didn't even wait for me to speak. "She told me she was divorced," he said plainly. Said her ex was obsessive. Sad. Pitiful, her word, said you used to cry about clocks. I thought she was exaggerating. My mouth went dry. "She moved into my place in March," he continued, still not looking at me. Said she needed distance while things were legally untangling. Had a story for everything. You were controlling. She was rebuilding. I believed her because, well, she's convincing. She's beautiful, confident, and when she talks, she makes you feel like you're already part of her future. I didn't interrupt. I just let him talk because honestly, I wasn't sure I could form words without shaking. Dane looked at me finally. But it started cracking a month ago. She'd leave for days, say she was with her sister or at training conferences, but the excuses didn't line up. One day, she left her laptop open and I saw something, a reservation under her name for a downtown suite, made for two. Not me. Not Evan. Someone else. I confronted her. He leaned forward now, like this next part had been sitting on his chest for weeks. She told me she needed to explore her options. That I was part of her evolution. She even asked if I'd be open to her seeing other people while we figured things out. I felt like vomiting. It wasn't just the words, it was how familiar it sounded. The calm manipulation. The reframing of betrayal as a phase. She hadn't just done this to me. She'd done it again. With full confidence. With precision. Then Dane did something I didn't expect. He pulled out a flash drive from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. There are messages. Videos. Audio notes. She sent me everything. She liked to document things. I don't know why. Maybe it made her feel in control. I stared at it. Like it was some cursed object. Like it held a version of Kala I hadn't seen yet, the one she kept locked behind passwords and polite smiles. I figured if you called, you deserved to see it too, Dane said. She used both of us. And if there's a third or a fourth, they'll probably never even realize it. I took the drive and left without saying much. Not because I was cold, but because my brain was already folding inward. I wasn't just betrayed. I was fabricated. Rewritten in someone else's narrative. Back home, I sat at my desk. The one next to the window she used to open every morning while humming to herself. I plugged in the drive. Inside were folders by name, Evan, Dane, Alan, me. That last one? It was labeled wallpaper. There were over 40 audio notes. Clips of her talking to herself. Practicing explanations. Managing lies. One stood out, dated 6 months ago around our anniversary. Ellis isn't dumb. Just slow. He notices things but never pushes. That's what makes it so easy. He doesn't want to lose me, so he pretends not to see the exit signs I leave. She laughed at her own words. A soft, breathy laugh that made my skin crawl. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just listened. To her. To the woman who knew exactly how to vanish while keeping her hands clean. And sometime around 3 a.m. after the 38th clip, after she described Dane as a distraction while Evan grows a spine, I realized she wasn't planning a life. She was building an empire. Out of people. Men. Lies. Trust. But even empires crumble. And this time she'd left a crack wide enough for everything to come crashing through. By sunrise, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had listened to 39 of her recordings. The 40th wouldn't load. Maybe it was corrupted. Maybe it was never supposed to. But I didn't need more proof. I had enough to rebuild the entire last year of my life from her perspective, and it looked nothing like the version I lived through. She didn't just lie. She curated. She scheduled. She ran men like meetings, each of us serving a different function. Dane for status. Evan for passion. Me for quiet. For stability. For convenience. I wasn't just a placeholder, I was the control sample. The guy she could point at and say, "See how far I've come?" And the worst part? I still didn't hate her. Not really. I hated the version of me I had to become just to be tolerable in her world. I hated how small I let myself become to keep her big. I hated how often I'd smile through humiliation I hadn't even realized was happening at the time. But I didn't hate her. Because you can't hate what you still don't understand. So I decided to stop reacting and start investigating. I called the number from her planner, the one marked HR confidential. I pretended to be a confused intern. It worked. They thought I was from a different branch and didn't even ask for verification before giving me the internal extension for employee wellness. There, I learned something I wasn't ready for. Kala had filed 2 internal complaints in the past year. Both against female coworkers. Not men. Not rivals. Women. One had apparently violated boundaries, the other was creating disruption. Neither were still employed. But here's what was wild, both of them had, at some point, also dated Evan. I know what you're thinking, coincidence. But no. Kala had pulled them in the same way she pulled in Dane, Evan, me. She created triangles, tension, paranoia, and every time she looked like the composed center while chaos spun around her. This wasn't about cheating. This was about control. So I kept digging. I called a friend of hers from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a woman named Remy who had been her roommate for 1 semester before suddenly transferring dorms. I told her I just wanted to understand what was happening. She didn't hesitate. Remy didn't just talk, she poured. She did this in college too, she said. Not to you. To everyone. Guys fell for her fast. Women started cutting each other off. She'd drop hints that people were talking behind each other's backs, but always so innocently, like she was trying to help. And then she'd step back and let everyone burn each other alive. I didn't even know how to respond. Remy continued. I left because she told my boyfriend at the time that I was cheating on him. I wasn't, but she made it sound like she just wanted to protect him. 2 weeks later, they were hooking up. She paused, then added something that haunted me. Kala doesn't break people. She lets them break themselves, she just supplies the tools. I hung up and sat with that. Kala wasn't a villain in the way people think villains are. She wasn't cruel in public. She wasn't violent or obvious. She was precise. She used charm as camouflage and left no fingerprints. I had never been in a relationship. I'd been in a chess game I never learned the rules to. But then I had a thought, a sharp one. Why leave her path so open? Why build so much risk around so many lies? And that's when it hit me. She wanted to be caught. Not by me. Not by Dane or Evan or even her company. By someone higher. Someone who couldn't ignore it. Someone she wanted to punish her. Or rescue her. Or both. There was one last folder on the flash drive I hadn't opened yet. It had no name, just a dash. Inside was a single video, titled with a date that hadn't happened yet. It was 3 days from now. I pressed play. It was her, looking straight into the camera. In a hotel room I didn't recognize. Her face serious. No makeup. Hair down. No jewelry. Just her voice. If you're watching this, it means I never got to finish what I started. Or maybe I finished it too well. Either way, I'm done. I don't want sympathy. I want silence. And for once, I want to leave something behind that I don't have to edit. She paused. He loved me. All of them did. But that's not the point. The point was to see if they'd still love me after. No one ever does. The video ended there. Just like that. I sat back in my chair, suddenly aware that everything I thought I knew wasn't just broken, it was possibly fabricated by someone unraveling slowly in the shadows. This wasn't about cheating. This wasn't about men. This was about someone spinning their own destruction like art. And the scariest thing? Part of me still missed her. Part of me still wanted to understand the ending to the story I had never agreed to be part of. But I wasn't going to wait anymore. Not for her. Not for closure. Not for whatever this plan of hers was. I was going to tell the truth before she got to write the final version. Because someone had to. I didn't sleep the night after watching that video. I couldn't. There was something wrong with it, not just in what she said, but in how she said it. That final sentence, no one ever does. It didn't sound angry. It didn't even sound sad. It sounded practiced. Like she'd rehearsed that phrase over and over, polishing it like a closing argument. And that's when I realized something I hadn't dared to think before. Kala didn't record that for closure. She recorded it to control the narrative in case she disappeared. Not emotionally. Literally. I opened my laptop again and rewatched the video, pausing at every frame, scanning the background. Then I saw it. In the far right corner of the frame, near the mirror, barely visible, a silver luggage tag. It reflected the soft hotel light just enough for me to read part of a hotel logo. It wasn't a local hotel. It wasn't even in the state. I looked it up. It was a resort in Oregon. She'd never mentioned Oregon in her life. She hated pine trees. Said rain depressed her. And yet she'd filmed her, if you're watching this video, there? So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the resort. I didn't ask for her by name. I just asked if someone had checked in under the initials CH 3 days ago. The woman on the other end hesitated for half a second too long. It was all I needed. I said thank you and hung up. She was still alive. She was watching everything play out. Every call, every discovery, every unraveling message, and she was probably tracking my behavior the same way she tracked all her chess pieces. But here's the twist. She miscalculated this time. Because I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to corner her with truth or demand an apology. That's what she was waiting for, the big confrontation, the final dramatic monologue where she could rewrite our history in one last breath. I wasn't giving her that. Instead, I started telling the truth. Not to the police. Not to her company. Not to Dane or Evan or any of the others she burned. I went back to the beginning, to the one place she always underestimated, her own family. Kala hadn't spoken to her mother in 5 years. Some old fight about money and independence and controlling energy, as she once put it. But I remembered where her mother lived. And more importantly, I remembered the one person Kala always swore never to be like her. I drove 4 hours the next morning, across counties and fog-covered hills, and knocked on the door of a tired little house with wind chimes and sun-bleached mailboxes. Her mother opened the door and blinked at me. For a second, she didn't recognize me. Then her face shifted, not into shock, not even sadness, but something stranger. Like she'd been expecting me. I figured one of you would come eventually, she said, stepping aside. Inside, the house smelled like old books and burnt toast. Her mother moved slowly but with a purpose. She poured tea, placed 2 mugs on a chipped coffee table, and said, "How many others has she sent away?" I stared. What? She always finds men who need fixing. Then breaks them in ways they didn't even know they could crack. She doesn't mean to be cruel. But she's addicted to it. The unraveling. The silence that follows. I told her everything, the messages, the flash drive, the video from Oregon. Her mother listened with the quiet patience of someone who's lived through the same storm a dozen times. Then she got up, went to a drawer, and returned with a notebook. This was hers, she said. She left it when she moved out at 19. I've never opened it, figured it was her diary or some angsty poetry. But maybe it's time someone read it. I took the notebook and left. I didn't open it until I got back home. And when I did, it wasn't a diary. It was a blueprint. Calla had written down scenarios, conversations, probabilities. She had flowcharts of emotional reactions, complete with labels like tearful shutdown, inward collapse, aggressive rebound. Under the name Ellis, she had written, loyal, passive, ideal for long-term support structure. Risk, low. Reward, moderate emotional cover. That's all I was to her. A cover. But what stunned me even more was the final entry. A single sentence dated 2 months ago. If Ellis ever wakes up, initiate final exit. There it was. My whole identity in her life reduced to a trigger. She knew this day would come. She planned for it. And that meant only one thing. She was still watching. Waiting. But now? So was I. And for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like wallpaper. I felt like the only man in the room who finally knew what game was being played. And that made me dangerous. The notebook sat in front of me for hours after I finished reading it. Not because I was stuck, but because, for the first time in years, I was free. No more questioning what was real, no more searching for a version of her that never existed. The fog had lifted and all that was left was space. And that space felt like oxygen. I didn't text her. I didn't email. I didn't even touch the second phone again. I unplugged it and threw it in a drawer next to an old set of keys I didn't recognize anymore. Then I called a moving company. Within a week, I left that house. The one where I'd memorized the sound of her footsteps and the pauses in her sighs. I donated the furniture. Sold the couch we bought during our 2nd anniversary. Left behind the mattress we shared. I only kept 2 things, a small wooden clock I repaired by hand when we first moved in and the notebook. Not as a reminder of pain. As proof of survival. I moved into a smaller place. Just 1 bedroom facing a quiet street where old trees bent gently toward the morning light. I painted the walls a shade of blue I'd always liked, but we never used because she said it was too sleepy. I bought mismatched plates and ugly mugs that made me smile. I put books on the floor because I didn't have shelves and for once I didn't care. And slowly things started growing. Not big, dramatic changes. Not montages of reinvention. Just life inching forward like roots under snow. One day I met someone at a local bookstore. Her name was Arden. She didn't ask me what I did for a living. She asked me what made me curious. I didn't know how to answer at first, but I remembered what it felt like to want to. She wasn't loud or perfect or charming in the way Calla had been. She was real. We talked about old movies and flawed characters and why people lie when silence would be easier. She wasn't trying to impress me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to shrink myself just to keep someone near. She didn't fix me. That was never her job. I fixed me slowly, awkwardly, but completely. Calla never came back. Not with a message. Not with a dramatic apology. Not even with a farewell. And that somehow was the greatest gift she gave me. Because closure didn't come from her. It came from waking up one day and not needing to understand her anymore. It came from standing in my new kitchen, brewing coffee, and realizing I liked the quiet. It came from walking down a street where no one knew who I had been, only who I was becoming. So if you're reading this and you've been someone's placeholder, someone's soft landing while they chase sharper things, let me say this. You are not wallpaper. You're a wall that can hold itself up. You're the ceiling they never learned to look beyond. And when they finally vanish, when they disappear into the storm they created, you'll still be standing. Alive. Whole. And finally free.